Hi, I'm Mary from SEAG, and it's June, and welcome to our June newsletter. And I am in my hometown of Ojai, and I'm really excited to be here with Connor Jones from East End Farms, or East End Eden Farms. And I'm so excited about this particular interview because what Connor does is he does aquaponics, and I know very little about that, as well as I'm sure you do. And it's a very progressive, cutting-edge form to grow food, and I cannot wait to hear about it. And Connor, how are you today?
Doing great. Happy to be able to share with you about what I'm doing.
And I'm excited to hear all about it. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get to the aquaponics?
Sure. Yeah. I'm 22 years old. I grew up in Ojai, and I've always had an interest in the environment and in creating little ecosystems. As a kid, I was always interested in like having aquariums and terrariums and stacking all these different species in there and making it like an observable ecosystem in my backyard or in my room even. And just I've always had a fascination with designing those closed loop sort of environmental systems. And so when I was in high school, my last month of high school, sort of by chance I got into permaculture. And permaculture is a design science for sustainable human settlements. That's one definition. But essentially it's about creating a cultivated human-centric ecosystem. So the person is at the center, and there's an ecosystem surrounding of mutually beneficial symbiotic food plants and animals, livestock, and the wildlife, all working together harmoniously to create a lot of productivity for people.
And that is what you've created here.
Yes. Yeah, and so the aquaponics is one part of that, and that's sort of a product of the inspiration within my family now with permaculture, because I was sort of just educating myself with it and then got some formal education, and then I actually got a book on aquaponics for my birthday, and my dad took that book and read it in a month, and a month later he was out there designing the foundation for the aquaponics building, and him and I designed it together, and a friend of mine built it for us, and we all helped. It was sort of a family thing.
Was that the moment of inspiration? Was the book?
For my dad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the name of the book?
It was called Aquaponics Gardening. I think that's aquaponic gardening. Yeah. Yeah, so that just kind of like, my dad does fire sprinkler installation in Orange County and kind of has that, he's got a really good mind for how to move water throughout pressurized pipes and plumbing systems and this and that. And so he wanted to bridge what he does with permaculture. And so aquaponics was an easy route for that.
So the passion was the water and the, so that being said, when I first met your family I met your father, and he was very interested about what I do. And so when I talked to him about ag education and teaching kids, the first thing, he was very proud to tell me about you. And he said, you have to meet my son and see what he's doing. And he lives in a beautiful home up on top of the mountain overlooking Ojai Valley. And he said, you've got to go see what he's doing down there. So tell us a little bit. We're in the middle. I love the name of your farm because this is an Eden. It's biodynamic. I'm looking at apple trees. There's goats behind me. I can hear chickens. I can hear the filtration system for your fish inside of the nursery, inside of the greenhouse. So tell us a more about your farm and more about the aquaponics.
Okay. Yeah, the name East End Eden is kind of a play on East of Eden, and that's kind of a familiar title, the Steinbeck book, and and then also just the notion of Eden, and particularly in the East End of Ojai, it's very dry, and it's pretty much dominated by monocultures that have kind of turned it into borderline man-made desert sort of environment, and I wanted to show that it's possible to grow all of these different things that do really well in Ojai without excessive irrigation, without chemical fertilizers, without herbicide, without all of these intensive inputs that monocultures require. And the way to do that is to create a forest of all those things that's a very Eden-like forest.
A food forest, perhaps?
Yes, absolutely. That's what it is a biodiverse food forest that's not only just fruit trees, but there's long-term nut trees that'll produce for 800 years. There's timber trees that will harvest in 35 years and mill up into building materials for the next generation. So we're kind of working with a design for many generations down the line, and the forest is just in its early stages. So this is 5 years of progress, and there are some areas now where the forest is starting to close in. There's a lot of things that are available to eat all year that don't need to be irrigated, that all you do is just walk through and pick.
Well, when I first walked through the canyon, I noticed right away the amount of work that went into creating this Eden. And you, before the cameras turned on, you said that you did this out of love and out of a labor of love. And I can feel it from you, and I can feel it here on the land. This was an incredible amount of work. So what did it look like before you, and how long has it taken you to get to this point?
This has been about 5 years, so since I got out of high school. And the way it looked before, there wasn't a whole lot growing here. There was sort of a mixed orchard. There were some apples, some Asian pears, some older plum trees, but not a whole lot of diversity, pretty much bare soil underneath them. And then aside from that, it was eucalyptus, and then several areas where we had cut down eucalyptus. But this, before we even purchased the property, was a monoculture of eucalyptus that was planted for timber. And as it happened, the eucalyptus wasn't a viable timber source, and so we were left with 40 acres practically of eucalyptus planted on the neighboring property and on ours.
So this is 40 acres the total?
This whole little valley, and it's divided between four landowners. So ours is a 10-acre plot, the neighbor's is 10 acres, the other neighbor's 10 acres. So,
okay.
But altogether,
so you cultivated 10, approximately.
Yeah. Well, less than that, but the entire property and the neighboring property is part of the plan, because this whole area is the catchment, the watershed, the micro watershed catchment that we're working with in all of our rainwater harvesting and water retention landscapes. And our neighbors at Ojai Olive Oil Company too are super keen to integrate more permaculture-based practices. They're now organic, and they're looking at how drought is an issue, and we're designing contour earthworks to harvest rainwater, and we're building ponds for wildlife habitat and for our own decentralized water supply. So in case, all of our eggs are kind of in one basket with Lake Casitas, so if we have our own decentralized water, then it's more security for us.
So what I'm getting from you is that you're really in touch with the earth, with the environment, with the weather, what you can grow in this area, what makes sense, what makes you feel good. And as I'm sitting here, I can smell all these different wonderful smells. And you created this really amazing, this is a true biodynamic homestead, because you not only are growing all these different things that you mentioned, the apples, the pears, and you can take us through those in a minute, as well as we really need to talk about the details of the aquaponics.
Yeah. But
you live here, this is your home, and it's just a lovely setting.
Yeah.
So talk to us about the animals that you have here. And you're going to give us some of your eggs, because you feed your chickens with coconut, and I really want to try them. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, yeah. We have 100 chickens, just about. There's 50 in this coop and straw yard over here.
Not just chickens, they're happy chickens.
Yes, yeah, and a lot of different, they're all heritage breeds, all different varieties. We go for diversity. It's biodiverse, is everything here is biodiverse. We have goats. We have 2 breeds, Saanen and Oberhasli, both Swiss mountain breeds, very rugged sort of heritage breeds that we take out every afternoon for at least 2 hours on a walk. So they forage throughout the oak woodland, the chaparral scrub, the grasslands on the other side of the hill, the olive orchard. So they get a really diverse feed.
Do they eat olive leaves?
They do. Yeah, they eat the
Does
leaves
Philip
and the
like
fruit.
that? Like
He actually, yes, because
they prune them.
it's a regenerative effect when goats impact the olive trees through grazing. It actually inspires the trees to regenerate quicker,
Okay.
and the newer growth on olive trees is where the flowers and the fruit forms.
Okay.
So it is actually an old and somewhat ancient guild of having goats and olives. It's a French and a Spanish and a Portuguese thing to move goats through the olive orchard.
Amazing.
So we do the goats. We
You
get
have pigs.
we have 3 pigs that we've been raising on food scraps. We've probably, I can't even estimate how many tons of food waste we have reclaimed from going to the landfill.
Wow.
We haven't spent any money on feeding the pigs. We paid for them, and we purchased them from a breeder who was raising Berkshires, which are not endangered, but somewhat of an uncommon heritage breed. And so we're raising 3 of those.
You'll be happy to know by 2020 that no food waste can go into our California landfills. It's been mandated by
Is
the
that
state
right?
of California. So our food waste will be collected, and it will go to energy. It'll be put in biodigesters.
Okay.
So that is something that
That's good news.
A little bit of good news for you.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so the pigs over there are our biodigesters right now. And with them, we have chickens that aren't yet laying eggs. They're still young, and they're going through and they're cleaning up after the pigs, basically. So it's sort of like a symbiosis with the pigs and the chickens. And then we raise fish, and that brings us to the aquaponics. There's about 300 fish in the aquaponics building.
300?
Yeah.
I
And
thought you were
they're
going to say
small.
10. This is exciting.
Yeah, so they're all pretty small fish.
What kind of fish?
There's catfish, bluegill, carp, koi, and goldfish.
Again,
Biodiverse. So the catfish, the bluegill, and the carp are, the ones that are potential for eating, particularly the catfish. The goldfish are more for nutrient cycling and for cleaning the tanks out. But the way the system works is that we feed the fish. They have a very nutrient-rich excrement that floats around in the water, and since they're...
Now, why is it so nutrient rich? Is it because of what they eat and their digestive system?
Yes, I think it is a lot to do with just the actual digestion of the fish. Granted, in a natural environment, they're going to have even more nutrient-rich manure excrement. But the other feature is that when they inhale and water passes through their gills, there's an exhalation of ammonia. So the water is nitrified, or it's ammonia rich. And
plants love nitrified water.
yes, so that water comes up through a pump into the grow bed, which is about 10 inches deep, and it's filled with these clay balls that are fired at a high temperature in a rotating oven. And so it's filled with that, and that's what we plant directly into. And so the water comes in, floods the bed, it reaches a certain height, and then we have this very simple mechanism called a bell siphon that basically just uses the pressure of the water to create a vacuum to draw all the water back out of the bed. So water goes in, nitrified, filled with fish waste, and filters through the root system of all of our vegetables, goes through all of this porous clay media, which has several different bacterial colonies that break down the fish waste and turn it into plant available nutrients. And then once it's reached capacity and gone through all the root systems, it comes back through the vacuum that's created through the water itself and the height that it's set to be, and tumbles over itself, oxygenates, and pours back into the fish totally clean and clear. So it's a managed system
a
that's
managed system, and it's very efficient.
Yes.
And all the pieces work together as a whole, for the whole.
yeah.
So I'm noticing in your Eden that there's no row crops here, and many of the farms that I visit have row crops, and they're all in the straight line, and this has no. What's wonderful and beautiful about your Eden, your farm, is there's no lines. It's like a jungle, and so why did you grow it like this or create this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Nature doesn't provide a linear system. It all moves cyclically. It's never just a straight line to, input to output. So everything we're modeling is based off of nature. The way we design the food forest is like a forest. The only lines that you will see are contour lines. Now, nature does provide a line, but essentially what it is this beautiful undulating serpentine line that we find using a water level or an A-frame or surveying equipment, and this is nature's expressive line. And we dig trenches on that line, or we'll plant on that line, or we'll build raised beds on the contour line. What that is this level line. So when water is moving down the landscape with the force of gravity, this line is always perpendicular to the flow of water, so it stops the water. Instead of row crop lines that allow water to run straight off the land, it actually backs the water up and causes it to infiltrate. So the only time you'll see lines are if they're contour lines and they're designed to harvest rainwater and reduce erosion.
So everything here is sensitive, and that's just the way nature works. It's all connected. It's all very sensitive to each other, and so you're just expanding upon the natural world that already exists.
Yeah, it's I see it, working with contour lines and planting on them and designing earthworks in that way too to harvest rainwater is just kind of allowing the land to express a different fractal of itself. Instead of imposing,
what you just said is yours.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about imposing order on the land, but finding the line that is given.
So let me ask you this. So there's 7.4 billion people on the planet today, and they all want to eat, and they all want to be fed, and so that is the conversation that I get into a lot of times. So do you, after doing this for 5 years, do you believe that the system that you have created can be replicated and feed that many people?
Absolutely. I think there's no other option. Realistically, there is no other way to grow food where it's a regenerative process, where you're recharging aquifers, where you're building soil, where you're increasing biodiversity, where you're making more habitat, and people are being fed at the same time. Agriculture as it is now really, really needs a makeover because we're draining our last reserves of water under the ground. We're losing this thin layer of soil that our very lives depend on. And yeah, and through large scale agriculture, we're destroying a lot of habitat. And we need the birds, we need all the different species in our local area in order to even maintain a healthy biology in the surrounding area to be able to grow food.
And we need bees.
Yeah, absolutely need bees. We need there's no one creature within the ecosystem that is less important than another. So we have to accommodate for all those things. And so one of the policies here is that we plant we overplant. We factor in a 30% loss to wildlife. But it's not a loss, it's an offering, because we can't do it without them.
That is also amazing and wonderful.
Yeah.
Kudos to you, Connor.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
it's something to be really I'm very proud of you. And I know this isn't easy. There's a lot of hard work and a lot of planning, and what you're doing is absolutely amazing. And so if someone wants to learn more and come here and learn more about what you do, hopefully to do something similar.
Yeah.
You told me that you do agricultural education or permaculture or
Yeah.
aquaponic education.
Yeah.
And how would someone go about reaching you?
Through the website, ohipermaculture.com. There's a contact page. Send me a personal email, and we do personal guided tours for small groups. We do school groups.
UCLA was just here.
We had UCLA out here, 7 students from a club there, and then we just had 28 7th graders from a school down in Aliso Viejo. So, definitely wanting to get into the educational system, and not just the system, but the minds of the young people, because it's really going to be people my age and younger that are going to be are inheriting the world and need to know these ways of stewardship of, the land and water in order to continue.
So another form of ag education for me is to really reach the general public that don't have any idea of how and where their food is coming from. And one of the solutions that CAG has come up with is Farm Day, which is September 27th. And I believe you just signed up for Farm Day.
Yeah.
And Ojai Olive Oil is also in Ladera Canyon, and you're only a mile away.
Or less.
Less from Ojai Olive Oil up the canyon. So that'll be a perfect, if someone wants to come to Ojai on Farm Day, you'll be able to visit 2 farms in very close proximity that are very different from one another. So that's very good. So any last words that you want to say about your Eden and your farm and why this is so important to you?
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I'd like to share isn't necessarily about this place specifically, but just that anybody can do this, and that it's something that we need to start looking at culturally. And permaculture isn't necessarily permanent agriculture, as some see it as. It's about a permanent culture. Permanence in culture comes from a permanent supply of resources, and that's a sustainable supply of resources. And if we want our culture to grow and continue and become richer, then we have to make sure that the way we produce our food is permanent too. And agriculture now is so impermanent and such a fragile system. We need to become more resourceful and understand how to diversify and create living ecologies that benefit our needs. And to answer your other question too about population, one of my teachers, Sepp Holzer, who's been doing this for almost 70 years, is convinced that we can feed 3 times as many people on planet Earth and improve the functions of the ecosystems all over the planet at the same time. So this is a human evolutionary step, I feel. Yeah.
What's so interesting is that's the way it was, how we started.
Yeah.
And then we've gotten away from that. So if we go back to that for human evolution, it will be it'll be very, very interesting. So thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
allowing us to come to your home.
Thank you.
And your Eden. And if you want to learn more about what Connor does, go to ohipermaculture.com, and we'll see you again next month. Thank you. And thank you. Good job.
Thanks.